Returning stateside, NFL playoffs underway. The wildcard weekend has come and gone. The Cleveland Browns stole the show. We'll talk about that in a moment. But elsewhere, for two things that don't mix, sport and politics can't stop mixing. So on Sunday, and we discussed it last night with Lawrence Donegan, if you want to listen back, the PGA of America took fire at Donald Trump, followed by the RNA when it comes to Turnberry as well, hosting an Open Championship anytime soon. It wasn't all bad though. Gary Player and Annika Sorenstam were at the White House on Thursday to pick up their Presidential Medal of Freedom. Now, it would seem, though, Bill Belichick, legendary coach of the New England Patriots, has turned down a Presidential Medal of Freedom. For more, we've got Tara Sullivan from the Boston Globe with us. Evening, Tara.
Hello there, how are you?
Good, great to have you with us. So the timeline here, we're talking obviously about the highest civilian honour. This was reported on Sunday that this could be heading Belichick's way. So this is all kind of news of the last 72 hours, really.
That is correct. Yeah, as games were being played on Sunday and football was at the forefront of the sports conversation as it was. It was a website, political website here called Politico, that broke that news saying that Belichick was on the schedule for this coming Thursday, which would be 2 days from now, to receive the Presidential Medal of Honor, and that it would have been one of those closed door, no media events, but that he was slated to receive it, yes.
So he came under pretty significant pressure, as I understand it. I know you wrote a column to the effect of similar to those of your colleagues, like Bob Ryan, a colleague of yours at the Globe. If this story about Belichick accepting the Medal of Freedom from the disgraced occupant of the White House is true, he's dead to me. Say it ain't so, Bill. And then Dan Shaughnessy as well, I saw, said if he receives the award, it makes things difficult for him in his locker room and in this community. Sentiments you probably agreed with. This was a big no-no if Bill was thinking about this.
It was, and listen, I wrote it, and I did say, just don't do it, Bill. Appreciate the offer, but politely decline, because, listen, I understand that's a really difficult thing to do. That's a personal sacrifice, right, to say no to the highest civilian honor that we have in the United States. But it doesn't happen without the context and where we are as a nation right now, and what has been going on at the White House, at the Capitol, in Washington, D.C. So Bill Belichick has built his coaching career, maybe the best coaching career of all time, on one simple principle, which is team above self. And I just felt very strongly that if he accepted this personal honor, it would offend his team in such a manner, and it would be such a distraction, and it would put himself above that team. And he just needed to make that sacrifice, because I could not imagine him returning to his locker room full of, mostly black athletes who have butted heads with President Trump, and NFL players who have been, just really, really criticized by him. And it just would have been very difficult. And it would have been hard enough under any circumstance. But this past week in American politics, with the attack on the Capitol and the role it appears Trump played in that, I just think it was untenable, and he could not be seen in a photo op with the president under that circumstance.
And so the Patriots dressing room has been engaged with the Trump issue, has it?
Overall, through the years, the NFL and NFL players at large have been very engaged, because going back to the kneeling down during the anthem and Colin Kaepernick, and things that Trump has said about the NFL and calling them sons of bees and they should all be fired, and just really having, if you're going to kneel for the anthem, that's the worst thing you can do. It's the worst sign of disrespect. And I felt in this case, if people felt that were true, what happened at the Capitol was so much worse and made that pale in comparison, even to the specific issue of respect for our flag, which was torn down and replaced by a Trump flag, and at one point saw the Confederate flag of, carried through the halls of the Capitol, a Confederate flag, that never even flew in the Capitol during our American Civil War. So to me, what happened in this past week changed everything completely. And I think that's what Belichick realized when he ultimately declined to accept the honor.
To give people a sense of the Belichick statement, he says, I was offered the opportunity to receive the Presidential Medal of Freedom. Subsequently, the tragic events of last week occurred, and the decision has been made not to move forward with the award. And then he went on to say that he's an American citizen with great reverence for our nation's values, freedom and democracy. I know I also represent my family and the New England Patriots team, remaining true to the people, team and country I love outweigh the benefits of any individual award. That does read as team first here. It does read as if I'm a legend in Massachusetts. This is Democrat land. This is home to the Kennedys. Frankly, I'd be killed. As opposed to, I saw what went on. I thought this was a disgrace. I wrote a letter to this guy in 2016. I'm now ashamed to be associated with him. Therefore, I declined the offer. It does seem more of the former than the latter, I have to say.
And I could agree with you there, and certainly that's why, you know, I have no doubt it was a difficult decision, but I think he had to realize, yes, what the repercussion would have been to his professional career. You know, I literally have 120 unopened emails still to go through, but I can tell you that every one of them, nearly every one of them is, if he does this, I'm dropping my season tickets. And I have no doubt that Patriots people were letting Bill know that, and that they felt this is a guy who was raised in a military family. His father has a Navy background, and, you know, that it just would be insulting. And I do think it's obvious he doesn't reference President Trump directly, and, you know, he doesn't say anything, you know, about him or politics in general. He just says they were disgraceful, and I think he tried to tread that line, but ultimately for me, he did the right thing. So, you know, I kind of understand where that statement came from.
Yes, I guess actions speak louder than words, he might argue. Belichick's relationship with Trump. So 2016, this kind of came to the fore. Trump was in Manchester, New Hampshire, and he was, this was close to election time. And in a very Trump way, he said, I've got this lovely letter from Bill Belichick, and I'm going to read it out, because that's just the kind of thing Trump does. So the letter that Belichick had sent Trump in 2016 said, congratulations on a tremendous campaign. You have dealt with an unbelievably slanted and negative media. That's you he's talking about, Tara. And you've come out beautifully, beautifully. You've proved to be the ultimate competitor and fighter. Your leadership is amazing. I have always had tremendous respect for you, but the toughness and perseverance you've displayed over the past year is remarkable. Hopefully, tomorrow's election results will give the opportunity to make America great again. Best wishes for great results tomorrow. And then I presume it said, lots of love, Bill. So like this is, you know, 60% Hillary territory in 2016, 65% Biden in 2020. How did that go down at the time? Did he get much heat for that?
He did get heat, but it's very difficult with Belichick, because to cover him and to try to deal with him media-wise, he just doesn't engage, right? He's the best I've ever seen at not being drawn into a conversation that he has no interest in having. So that's it. The letter is out there, but he's never talked about it. It's not something that has ever come up. So it's hard to continue extending that conversation. And by rights at that point, before we actually had gone through the 4-year administration of Trump, there were a lot of people who felt the same way, who may have since changed their minds. I don't know. And I don't know if Belichick has either. What I will say is, in these particularly this last year, as social justice and social justice movements in America have taken a different turn, and maybe a much deeper one, and very much involve leagues and teams putting their money where their mouth is and endorsing things that they didn't in the past. Belichick has spoken very passionately about changing this year, really hearing the stories of his players. And I think the pandemic had a lot to do with that, being on Zoom calls and just different things. So for him to also mention that in his statement about not taking the Medal of Honor, I thought was interesting and noteworthy. That I do think he's sort of trying to see the world a little differently, or starting to see the world a little differently, a little bit more from the perspective of his players. Okay,
that's very interesting, because I do know in 2016, you know, one of the few things he said about the letter was, look, I'm not a political person, you know. I'm not politically motivated. It was written out of friendship. I think anybody that spends more than 5 minutes with me knows I'm not a political person. So that's interesting. You're saying maybe 2020 has been a belated awakening of sorts?
Maybe. And listen, I'm the last person, I don't think any of us can read Bill Belichick's mind, but he has mentioned it more than once. It was in his statement yesterday. He gave a lengthy answer about it in his postseason press conference, that, you know, leaders on his team, Devin McCourty, Jason McCourty, Matthew Slater, longtime, very well-respected NFL players, who 10 plus years in the league, who are all Black and have been very involved in community efforts and, you know, different social justice movements. I think, yeah, Bill is just saying, I'm trying to hear it more. And it's not unlike, you know, to hear the actual commissioner of that league, Roger Goodell, who takes more heat than anybody, completely reverse course on some of the things that have gone on in the NFL as they regarded Colin Kaepernick, and apologizing straight up for not hearing what the message was and just judging it by what he saw.
For sure. Well, I mean, because it's so easy to be cynical about all this stuff, and as you rightly said, none of us are in the head of Belichick. But I mean, you could very conceivably say, well, what took you so long? Was it not fairly obvious this was a repulsive figure, and for however long he's been dividing America, and last couple of months is just the culmination of everything he's been doing. So, this is just a brand exercise. This is like where you haven't made it to the post game, the repercussions would be severe for you, and you just did it to save your own skin. That will be levelled at him, I suspect. How big a deal is it to turn down the Presidential Medal of Freedom? Like, how many precedents are there? Yeah,
I tried to look that up, and I found maybe 3 instances prior that it happened, including like President Truman, Harry Truman. I really don't know the answer to that. And I don't know. Yeah. And I don't know yet how difficult it was for him to turn it down. I'm interpreting that it must have been just because it should be such a high honor, and it should be something to be celebrated. But, for me, it just feels like Trump doing it for his friends and as an attempted distraction in these final days in office, rather than, what I would like to see is this sort of glorious, achievement or award for Belichick. So, yes. Tough to know what he's actually thinking. I do look forward to trying to ask him about it. I certainly will the next time we have an opportunity.
Tara, I'm sure he looks forward to not answering your questions.
I'm sure he does.
So, but far from commonplace then, if you're saying you only found, on a quick Google or however you checked, maybe 3 examples. So this is still a pretty rare thing to happen to a president.
It is. Yeah. Yeah, for sure. And I wonder if it, I doubt anything else will, because I don't think other people will be in that public figure. I don't know. It's curious to figure out if Belichick, if it was the fact that it got out, would he have got, I don't know. I don't know how all of it would have played out otherwise, but this is how it played out, and he did turn it down. So I think in the end, like I said, as I wrote, I gave him credit for doing the right thing.
Yeah, okay. Very interesting. I mean, God, what a mad few days over in your neck of the woods. It really is
crazy.
Insane.
Yeah.
So I want to talk about the NFL postseason, which is now underway. Usually, I mean, you'd have to go back to 2008. Usually, Patriots would be very much part of that conversation. It is now not part of the conversation, and it's easier than ever to make the playoffs. 14 teams now as opposed to 12. So what's happened here to the Patriots? Often when a coach has set an outrageous pace of winning, and then that slows down, and they don't make the post game, invariably questions will be asked, and is he past it, is the question that people can ask. Is that happening?
Oh, is it happening? Yes and no. I mean, the NFL is a parity-driven league, so anything can change from year to year. They were always, the Patriots were the team that broke the mold in that regard. Obviously, no Tom Brady. We knew it was going to be a strange year. Cam Newton, who they signed as a last-minute replacement, wasn't able to lift them the way that he had hoped. But there are definite issues. Listen, the Patriots led the league in opt-outs, optional opt-outs for COVID. So sometimes we forget that. There were 8 players, including many good starters on defense and their offensive line, who chose before the season they weren't going to play. Then, of course, you have the normal attrition of injury, not great performance, and the Buffalo Bills sort of finally rising to give them a decent challenge in their division. But they have a lot of work to do. And the thing is, they do have a lot of cap room in the U.S. You have a salary cap, and you have different money allocated. So now that Brady's money is completely gone, they have a little more room to work with, but they have a lot of holes on their roster. And that number one, it's still quarterback. So that's what fascinates me. I think that not answering that quarterback question, not really having a solid plan when it appeared, pretty obvious that Brady was going to be gone. That's what's going to be the thing that Belichick really has to figure out going forward.
And do you suspect Cam Newton will be the answer for next season?
It doesn't seem that way, no. All indications were that he really wants to be back with his family, or I don't know. It's almost like a blip on the radar screen. And I wrote this after their final regular season game. Like, I feel like 20 years from now, we're going to be saying, Cam Newton played for the Patriots? Yeah. Like, because it's the strangest season anyway, right, on record. Like, we haven't been in locker rooms. We never saw him dress. Like, all that stuff that we would normally do. You didn't get to just kind of chat with him at different times or see him on the practice field. And now I think he's going to be gone. And I don't know. It's funny. Adam Schefter, who is a leading NFL reporter here in America on ESPN, mused that Newton might end up in Washington, and that he could command like $20 million a year. And I don't see that. Like, that surprised me when I saw that, because I just don't think he showed enough on the field this year, there were clear issues, whether they were physical or just age or the toll of, his physical running style and the things he's done in the NFL. I don't see him being the answer next year. I think maybe they go to another veteran and they're going to have to draft a quarterback, maybe in the first round.
Okay. Well, to the postseason at hand then. So we had the wild card weekend. We've got divisional round this weekend.
They call it the super wild card now.
I saw that,
as you pointed out. Yes,
14.
because there are extra teams, the super wild card.
Oh, it's exciting. Already I'm sold. I'm sold. So we've got divisional round coming up, which is quarterfinal for those less initiated, championship round semis, and then Super Bowls in Tampa on February 9th. Just to add to the strangeness of the year, I mean, I do want to talk Cleveland Browns, but I was, as we all do these days, spending too much time on Twitter over the weekend, and a game popped up on my screen, and a touchdown was scored, and then digital slime cannons started shooting out green slime on the players, and then there was a kicker taking a kick, and there was a picture of SpongeBob or SquarePants, I'm not sure who, between the posts, and I thought,
he's the same person.
Is he? Okay, news to me. Sorry.
That's his last name. His first name is SpongeBob. His last name is SquarePants.
I've never watched it. This is an education. So I just thought they've lost it. I mean, God love them over there. It's gone. So then it turns out Nickelodeon were showing a game for kids. What a brilliant idea. Beautiful. Yeah.
It was a great marketing. Now, I don't have Nickelodeon on my streaming service at the moment, so I was like you, sort of catching the snippets and following along on Twitter. But I thought it was a fabulous idea, I'll be honest, because it was geared absolutely toward kids, and they had pop-ups explaining the rules and, fun stuff, putting googly eyes on somebody's face and just making the broadcast more fun. There are many outlets here to watch the game, and if you wanted the straight-on seriousness, there was no trouble finding that broadcast. So I think it's a smart move by the NFL to try to, because, sports audiences are shrinking everywhere and in every place, and TV audiences, all of it is shrinking, and they're all kind of clamoring for their corner of the space. So I thought it was a cute, really fun idea.
Yeah, and pitched at a really nice level. Like, one of the commentators was, clearly a former player, was asked, what's it like to be tackled? And he said, it's like falling down a wooden stairs. It was really pitched at trying to keep kids engaged. So lovely idea. The Cleveland Browns then, this is kind of the story of the weekend, I guess. First time in the playoffs in 18 years, and their first win in the playoffs in 26 years. And the mad thing was, I mean, they're up against the Pittsburgh Steelers. They're 28-0 up after the first quarter. This is incredible.
It was crazy. That was the most stunning result of the weekend, no doubt. And I'm sure, just as we have this conversation, did you note who coached them the last time they made that playoff appearance? Not the last playoff win, but the last playoff appearance was none other than Bill Belichick.
Oh, Bill.
Was their coach then. So it's been a long time coming for the Cleveland Browns as a franchise, as a team, with the players there. They have been one of the biggest butt of all the NFL jokes. I could name maybe one or two other franchises that have been as bad off as the Browns over the years. It seems they made a really good choice in Baker Mayfield. I thought his poise in this playoff game, obviously they had a big lead early, but his poise was really impressive, and he didn't really let his foot off the gas, which I thought was very important. But given everything, their coach at home in his basement, watching the game like an average person because he had COVID, and not having half of their coaching staff, and to pull that off, it's such a credit to how ready they were and how much they've rebuilt that franchise in a year under a new coach.
Yeah. Now, it may be as good as it gets because they have Kansas on the road next time out. So, but still, to win is a big thing.
It's house money for them now, right?
Yeah.
Like, the Chiefs are the defending champions. They had the week off. Maybe they're a little, maybe the Chiefs, their offense is always great, but it didn't seem to be firing quite as much on all cylinders later this season. And so I still think it's a great matchup. But from the Browns' perspective, getting that one win was everything for them. Yeah, kind of house money, I think, from this point on.
Tara, over here in our national games, there is a grand tradition of pinning up what the opposition said on the dressing room door and going ballistic. So over to you, Pittsburgh Steelers receiver Juju Smith-Schuster, who subsequently has said, I don't regret saying what I said in advance of the game, but in advance, he was asked about, going up against the lowly Browns, and it was a meandering kind of answer. He was even struggling. I don't think he had the enthusiasm to even finish, and culminated by just saying, look, Browns is the Browns. And this seemed to become the war cry, the mantra for the Browns.
Absolutely. And listen, that tradition is alive and well over here, too. Bulletin board material, especially in the playoffs, always welcomed by, the target of that stuff, because they'll take anything for motivation. And the fact that Smith-Schuster, he's been at the root of some of this stuff before, dancing on teams' logos and then saying stuff like that and trying to act like it's not a big deal. I'm just saying, we play the Browns every 2 years, or that's how some teammates tried to explain it afterwards. But it just shows, like, sports is the best reality show of them all, right? You can't take any result for granted. The Steelers had owned the Browns for how long, right? They beat them just for how many years running? I don't even have the stat in front of me, but a lot. And I think Smith-Schuster just lost sight of the fact that, any given Sunday is a cliche for a reason in NFL games, because any given Sunday, something wacky can happen, and one team can just show up and the other not. And that's what happened. The Steelers didn't show up, and that's a shame. That's, to their discredit.
Tom Brady, worth a mention. I mean, he's barely thought about you guys. Honestly, he doesn't care. It's so in the past.
He already said he's never living north again, and he was making fun of the snow in Boston while he was on his new boat. And yeah, he's having the time of his life down there. And hey, listen, he deserves it all, right? He proved he still had a lot left in the tank, and that's what he wanted to do.
Look, he's happier, and he's moved on.
Yeah.
And that's So he broke a 50-year-old record. He beat George Blanda's record to become the oldest player to throw a touchdown pass in a playoff game. He's 43 years old. Tampa Bay beat Washington football team 31 points to 23. So he plays Drew Brees and the New Orleans Saints in the next round, also in his 40s. Yeah. Brady 43, Brees 42, combined age 85. So they're going to break the previously held record of Tom Brady and Drew Brees, who were 84 the last time they played. And the previous record before that is Tom Brady and Philip Rivers. Basically, Tom Brady breaks this record every couple of years these days. How's he playing? How's he doing?
Yeah, he looks great. I mean, there were some bumps in the road this season, and there were some apparent kind of conflicts with his new coach, Bruce Arians, as to Brady's level of fault in some of their poorer games and things he was doing wrong. But ultimately, they have hit a stride, and I think they're rolling right now. I mean, he looks good. He has so many weapons, and that was the big complaint. I think that was his big frustration by the end of his time in New England, is that they just didn't continue to build around him and give him enough, weapons. So to see guys like Mike Evans or having Gronkowski back in that mix, but so many other great players down there, like that has just made a difference for him. And he looks great. His arm looks good. He's never going to be mobile, but he's holding up fine in the pocket. If they get pressure on him, that's the key. That's the key. He actually has the worst statistic. There's a stat called quarterback rating, and his has the largest drop off, like from when he's not pressured to when he is pressured, of anybody still playing or anybody in the league this season. So, I mean, I think that's going to be the key, and he is going up against a much better defense. And I was going to say, Washington came at him with some bulletin board material. You have a young, great defensive lineman on the Washington football team who said the minute he won the previous game, said, I want Tom Brady. I mean, you might as well just hand the red meat to the bear, right? I mean, I couldn't believe he did that. But Brady is rolling. It's going to be a fun game. I mean, that's the prime time. That's got the last slot of the weekend, and that's the one everybody's looking forward to the most, I think.
Are they? Okay.
But we haven't even mentioned Aaron Rodgers, right?
Okay,
I think what's so interesting when you mentioned Brees and Brady and the age, and then you throw in a Rodgers, and I know Rivers was there. Like, it just reminds me that, obviously the quarterback is the key, right? Everybody needs a quarterback, and there's always so much hype and excitement about the young guys coming in, but the experience matters a lot too, and I think that's what we're going to see a little bit in the playoffs and what we'll see in that game.
Yeah, and look, aging is changing. We're all eating better, living better.
Very great point.
The picture of Brady at 43 and George Blanda at 43, I mean, Blanda looks about 90, you know what I mean? Like,
it's so true, yeah. Great point. Yes, one looks like he could have been the other's father, for sure.
A little bit. So this weekend, if people are kind of sitting down and saying, I want to get stuck into some sport, you can tell me where the shock's going to happen or what game you think is worth definitely keeping an eye on. On Saturday, Green Bay very much expected to beat the LA Rams. You have the Bulls expected to beat the Ravens on Saturday evening. Then Sunday, Kansas will almost certainly beat the Browns. The Browns is the Browns after all. And then Tampa Bay, Tom Brady against New Orleans Saints. The Saints are favourites there. So are you expecting a shock anywhere along the way?
I think the Ravens will really give the Bills a game, and it's not a knock on the Bills because I think that they have a relatively young quarterback who's really come into his own, Josh Allen, and they have a very, very balanced roster, which I think is a real credit to what they built. But the Ravens, if people remember, like last year, they were the top seed and got upset early. And I think they're a bit on a mission, and they've hit a stride late. They had to work their tails off to get into the playoffs. They have Lamar Jackson, who is a former league MVP. Only a year ago, he looked like Lamar Jackson this past weekend. So to me, that's, if I had to pick an upset, I'd probably go Ravens, but it's with a very slim margin. I think that's going to be an excellent game. Physical as all get out, and really fun to watch.
Okay, great. Any of them on Nickelodeon?
I don't know, actually. That's a great question. As I said, I don't have Nickelodeon on my, I cut the cord over here, so I don't have it. But worth a look if anybody is looking for something different and fun and needs little pop-ups explaining a little bit of what's going on.
Listen, I am that guy. Tara Sullivan from the Boston Globe. Thanks so much. Appreciate it, Tara.
Thank you. Have a great one. Stay well.
Likewise. That's Tara Sullivan there from the Boston Globe.